Have you ever seen a painting that seems to watch you? A portrait whose eyes follow you around the room? For the Whitmore family, this chilling sensation became their terrifying reality when they moved into an old estate in rural Massachusetts, a house with a history as dark and twisted as the ancient oaks surrounding it. This is the story of the cursed mourning portrait of Abigail Whitmore. Our story begins in the summer of 2003. The Whitmore family, David, Sarah, and their two children, Emily and Josh, were looking for a fresh start. They found what they thought was their dream home, a sprawling 19th century estate, built in 1847, complete with creaking floorboards and a mysterious, musty smell they mistook for charm. The price was unbelievably low, a detail that should have been a red flag, but their excitement overshadowed any doubt. They were ready to fill the old house with new life. It was during their first week of unpacking that they discovered it. Tucked away in the dusty attic, leaning against a forgotten trunk, was a large, ornate portrait. The painting depicted a young girl, no older than 10, with pale skin, dark, sorrowful eyes, and long black hair. She wore a simple black dress, and a single tear was painted on her cheek. An inscription on the brass plaque at the bottom of the frame read, Abigail, 1847 to 1858. It was a mourning portrait, a common practice in the Victorian era to commemorate a deceased loved one. Sarah, an art history enthusiast, was captivated by its melancholic beauty and decided to hang it in the main hallway. That was their first mistake. Almost immediately, strange things began to happen. It started small. Objects would move on their own. A set of keys left on the kitchen counter would be found on the mantelpiece. Doors would creak open and slam shut in empty parts of the house. Cold spots would appear out of nowhere, sending shivers down their spines even on the warmest days. The family initially dismissed these occurrences as the quirks of an old house settling, but soon the phenomena escalated, centering around the portrait of Abigail. Emily, the youngest, was the first to notice. She'd complain that Abigail's eyes were following her as she walked down the hall. Josh, a bit older and more skeptical, would taunt the painting, only to be woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of a little girl whispering his name from the corner of his room. One evening, Sarah was alone, walking past the portrait, when she could have sworn she saw the tear on Abigail's cheek glisten, as if it were real. She reached out to touch it, and her fingers came back wet. She pulled her hand back in shock. It was just a painting. How could this be possible? The sense of unease in the house grew into a palpable fear. The haunting became more direct, more personal. The faint scent of lavender, which they later learned was used in 19th century burial rites, would drift through the hallways at night. The soft, sorrowful sound of a child crying would echo from the walls, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The family's dream home was quickly turning into a living nightmare. David, a practical man, tried to find rational explanations, checking for drafts, faulty wiring, and plumbing issues. But he couldn't explain the ghostly apparitions that began to appear. Emily saw her first a fleeting glimpse of a girl in a black dress standing at the top of the stairs. Then Josh saw her translucent figure reflected in the window, staring back at him with those same sad eyes from the portrait. The ghost of Abigail was no longer confined to her frame. Desperate for answers, Sarah began researching the history of the house and its original owners. She spent hours at the local historical society, sifting through brittle documents and faded newspapers. She discovered that the house was built by a wealthy merchant named Silas Whitmore, a distant relative of her husband, a chilling coincidence they hadn't known. Silas had a daughter, Abigail. The records showed that Abigail died suddenly in 1858 from a severe fever. Her father, devastated by the loss, commissioned the mourning portrait to remember her. But as Sarah dug deeper, she uncovered a darker, more horrifying secret. She found the personal diary of Abigail's governess, hidden away in an archive box. The governess wrote of Abigail's illness, but with a terrifying twist. The doctor had pronounced Abigail dead, but in the days leading up to her burial, the governess had heard faint scratching sounds coming from the sealed parlor where Abigail's coffin lay. She was dismissed as hysterical and grief-stricken. The burial proceeded as planned. The truth was unimaginable. Abigail hadn't died from the fever. She had fallen into a deep cataleptic state, a condition where the body appears lifeless. She had been buried alive. The scratching sounds, the whispers, the cold spots, it was the restless spirit of a terrified child, trapped and desperate for someone to hear her. Abigail wasn't haunting them out of malice. She was reliving her final, horrifying moments, trying to communicate her tragic fate. Armed with this terrifying knowledge, the Whitmores knew what they had to do. They contacted a local historian and an archaeologist who helped them locate the family cemetery on the property, long since overgrown. With the proper permits and a heavy sense of dread, they exhumed Abigail's small coffin. What they found inside confirmed their worst fears. The inside of the coffin lid was covered in scratches. Abigail had woken up in her own grave. The family gave Abigail the proper reburial she deserved, with a new headstone and a ceremony honoring her life. That night, for the first time since they moved in, the house was silent. The cold spots vanished. The scent of lavender was gone. The feeling of being watched disappeared. It seemed that Abigail's spirit, finally acknowledged and at peace, had moved on. The family, though shaken, felt a sense of relief. The nightmare was over, or so they thought. A few weeks later, they decided to sell the house, the memories too painful to live with. Before they left, David took down the portrait of Abigail. He intended to destroy it, to break the curse once and for all. But as he looked into her painted eyes, he found he couldn't. It felt wrong, like a desecration. Instead, he stored it back in the attic, hidden away where they first found it. Years passed. The house was sold to a new family, then another. Each time the story was the same. A period of peace, followed by the discovery of the portrait. Then the strange occurrences would begin again. The whispers, the cold spots, the fleeting image of a girl in a black dress. The portrait of Abigail, it seemed, was a permanent fixture, a conduit for the residual sorrow and terror of her tragic death. The painting itself had become the curse. Today, the old estate in Massachusetts still stands. The portrait of Abigail still hangs in the hallway, discovered by each new owner, its painted eyes forever watching, forever weeping. Her story serves as a chilling reminder that some tragedies leave a stain so deep, not even time can wash it away. The curse of the mourning portrait lives on, waiting for the next unsuspecting family. The first time I saw the Harlow house, a shiver traced its way down my spine, and it had nothing to do with the biting autumn wind. It was a true Victorian behemoth, all sharp angles and dark, watchful windows that seemed to stare down at me from its perch on the hill. It loomed over the neighborhood, a Gothic silhouette against the bruised purple of the evening sky. Pulling my jacket tighter, I walked up the cracked stone path, each step echoing in the unsettling quiet. The door creaked open before I even knocked, revealing Mrs. Harlow. She was a woman carved from ice, her smile thin and brittle. "You must be Maya," she said, her voice as crisp as frozen leaves. "Come in. We're running late." I stepped inside, and the cold from outside seemed to follow me in, seeping into my bones. The foyer was vast and shadowed, filled with antique furniture draped in white cloths, like ghosts waiting for a party that would never happen. The air was thick with the scent of dust and something else, something faintly sweet, like wilting flowers. "We appreciate you coming on such short notice," she said, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor as she led me through the labyrinthine hallways. Our usual sitter canceled. She didn't sound inconvenienced. She sounded rehearsed. We passed room after room, each one darker and more imposing than the last. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors watched me from the walls, their eyes seeming to follow my every move. Finally, we stopped before a small white door at the end of a long, narrow hall. "This is Lily's room," Mrs. Harlow announced, her hand hovering over the doorknob but not touching it. "She's already asleep. Please, whatever you do, do not go into her room. The baby monitor is on my husband's desk in the study. You'll be able to hear her if she needs anything. But if she wakes up, shouldn't I check on her?" I asked, confused. Her eyes, cold and dark, locked onto mine. The last sitter we had disturbed her. Lily is a very sensitive child. She doesn't like strangers in her space. If she cries, you can speak to her through the monitor. Just soothe her with your voice, but do not, under any circumstances, open that door. Are we clear? The intensity in her gaze was unnerving. "Yes," I stammered. "Crystal clear. Good." The thin smile returned. "My husband, Robert, is waiting in the car. We'll be back around midnight. The emergency numbers are on the fridge. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen." And with that, she turned and her sharp clicks faded down the hall. A moment later, I heard the heavy front door slam shut, the sound booming through the house like a cannon shot. And then, silence. A profound, suffocating silence that pressed in on me from all sides. The house was so big, and I suddenly felt so small. I found the study, a room lined with books that smelled of leather and age. On a massive oak desk sat the baby monitor, its small green light the only beacon in the gloom. I sank into the leather chair, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a shroud. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through my phone, but the silence was too loud. It was a living thing, breathing in the shadows. The house groaned and settled around me, the sounds of an old structure shifting, but each creak and pop sent a fresh jolt of anxiety through me. I kept glancing at the monitor, its speaker emitting only a faint, constant static. An hour passed, then another. The quiet was starting to fray my nerves. I found myself holding my breath, straining to hear something, anything, over the static. And that's when it happened. A crackle from the monitor, louder than the static. I leaned closer. It wasn't a cry. It was breathing. Slow, deep, and heavy. Ragged, like someone struggling for air. It was a sound far too deep, too guttural for a small child. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. It had to be interference, right? A crossed signal with a neighbor's device? I fiddled with the antenna, but the sound only grew clearer. It was coming from Lily's room. I picked up the receiver, my hand trembling. "Lily?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Are you okay, sweetie?" The heavy breathing stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I held my breath, my ear pressed against the speaker. Then, a voice. A low, raspy whisper that wasn't a child's, and certainly wasn't coming from me. "They're not coming back for you." Ice flooded my veins. I dropped the monitor onto the desk, scrambling back in the chair. It couldn't be I was hearing things. The old house, the creepy instructions, it was all getting to me. My mind was playing tricks on me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my frantic heart. I had to be rational. I picked up the monitor again, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to sound brave. The whisper came again, closer this time, as if the speaker were right next to the microphone. "She's been so lonely. It's been so long since we've had a visitor." "We?" I choked out. A dry, crackling laugh echoed through the speaker, a sound that made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Oh, yes. They left us here a long, long time ago. But you're here now. You can stay with us." Suddenly, a new sound. Not from the monitor this time, from upstairs, directly above me. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate pacing. Back and forth, back and forth. But the study was on the first floor. Lily's room was on the second floor, at the far end of the hall. The footsteps sounded like they were right over my head, in a room that shouldn't be occupied. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. This wasn't my imagination. Something was terribly wrong. I snatched my phone from my pocket, my fingers fumbling as I tried to call Mrs. Harlow. The call went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached the Harlows. We can't come to the phone right now." I tried again. Voicemail. I sent a frantic text. "Something is wrong. Call me now. Someone is in the house." No reply. The three little dots indicating she was typing never appeared. The pacing overhead stopped. The silence that fell back into place was 1,000 times more terrifying than the noise had been. My eyes were glued to the baby monitor, waiting, dreading. The whisper returned, but it had changed. It was no longer a raspy whisper, but a sing-song, childlike voice. A little girl's voice. "Do you want to play a game?" It chirped through the speaker. "It's called hide and seek, but we don't hide. We seek." A floorboard creaked just outside the study door. My blood ran cold. It wasn't upstairs anymore. It was down the hall. Then another creak, closer this time. Slow, deliberate steps were coming towards the study. I was frozen in the chair, a scream trapped in my throat. My phone was useless. The parents were gone. The front door was locked, and I didn't have a key. I was trapped in this massive, silent tomb with whatever was making its way down the hall. The baby monitor on the desk crackled one last time. It wasn't a voice this time. It was a giggle. A little girl's giggle, quickly joined by that same low, guttural rasp, laughing together in a horrifying harmony. And then the doorknob to the study began to turn. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chills. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in this situation. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.